Under the weight of twilight, the forest exhaled a silence so deep it seemed to listen to itself. Tall pines swayed gently in the fading light, their shadows stretching across the moss like fingers trying to catch the last of the sun. Elias had walked these woods many times, but that evening felt different. The path beneath his boots seemed unfamiliar, as though the earth itself shifted to lead him somewhere he had never been. He was not searching for anything, yet he felt drawn forward, guided by a pull in his chest that tightened with every step. The air carried a strange hum, faint at first, then louder, like the vibration of distant thunder that never broke into storm. His breath quickened. He thought of turning back, but something in him whispered to go on. The forest thickened until he stumbled into a clearing. At the center lay a stone, not large, but ancient. Its surface shimmered faintly with veins of silver light, pulsing as if it had a heartbeat of its own. Elias froze. He had heard tales of relics lost to time, shards of forgotten magic that the elders swore were only myths. And yet here it was, humming beneath the open sky. Curiosity overpowered fear. He reached out a trembling hand. The instant his fingers brushed the stone, the forest erupted with sound, leaves rattling, crows scattering into the sky, the earth groaning as though waking from a long sleep. His heart pounded, and for a moment he thought he had doomed himself. Then came the visions. They struck like lightning, flooding his mind with images he could not understand. Flames coiled around his arms, rivers froze in an instant, cities crumbled under skies torn by storms of fire and light. He saw 1,000 faces, some pleading, others twisted with hunger for power. A voice, distant yet near, whispered his name, Elias. It was not a question, not a command, but a recognition, as if the stone itself had always known him. When he pulled back, gasping, the glow faded but did not vanish. Instead, it sank into his skin. Lines of faint light crept up his hands, marking his veins like molten silver. Panic surged. He tried to rub it off, to scrape the glow away, but it pulsed deeper, settling inside him like a second heart. He stumbled back from the stone. The forest was no longer quiet. Every tree seemed to lean toward him, every branch stretched closer, as though the woods themselves bowed to the power that had chosen him. Elias shook his head, muttering to himself. This wasn't possible. He was just a villager, the son of a carpenter. Magic belonged to stories told by drunken travelers at the tavern, not to him. And yet, when he raised his hand in the dimming light, sparks flickered between his fingertips. Wild, uncontrolled, but undeniably real. He cried out, stumbling to his knees. The sparks hissed and vanished, but the truth remained. He had touched something ancient, and it had answered. That night, he could not sleep. He lay on his bed, staring at the wooden beams above, listening to the relentless thrum inside his body. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the visions again. Burning cities, storms of unnatural force, shadows with eyes that glowed like embers. His skin tingled as though invisible flames licked beneath it, and he could not shake the feeling that he was no longer alone inside himself. The following days were no easier. Tools splintered in his hands when he tried to work. Water in the pail rippled when he walked past. Once, when fear overtook him, the hearth flared violently, sending his mother screaming from the house. He could not explain. He dared not. Word of strange things spreads fast in small villages. Children whispered about his glowing hands. Women crossed themselves when he passed. Elias tried to ignore them, but the stares cut deeper than any blade. He had no answers, only fear. And then, one night, as he wandered the edge of the forest again, he found he was not alone. A figure stepped from the shadows, tall, cloaked, with eyes that reflected the moonlight unnaturally. Elias staggered back, sparks snapping at his fingertips without his willing them. The figure raised a hand, not in threat but in greeting, and the air grew heavy with the same hum he had felt the night he touched the stone. "You've been chosen," the stranger said, his voice deep and calm, like a river that had carved mountains. "The Aether has awakened in you." Elias's throat was dry. "I don't know what that means." "You will," the stranger replied. "But know this, power never stirs without purpose. The world is changing, and it has marked you to stand within the storm." Before Elias could speak again, the stranger vanished, dissolving into mist as though he had never been there. The hum lingered in the trees, and Elias was left alone with the unbearable truth. He was no longer just a boy from the village. He was something else, something dangerous, and the world had already begun to take notice. Elias woke at dawn with his head heavy and his skin still burning faintly where the silver marks had crept into his veins. He tried to convince himself it was only a dream, that the stranger in the forest had been a trick of the mind, born from fear and exhaustion. Yet when he opened his hands, faint light pulsed beneath the skin, answering his denial with an unyielding truth. The village stirred with the usual noise of morning, roosters crowing, buckets clattering, the chatter of neighbors trading bread and gossip. Elias walked among them like a ghost. He kept his sleeves drawn low, but he knew they whispered behind him. He caught fragments, cursed, possessed, marked. His mother avoided his eyes, and his father's silence was heavier than anger. That day, when he tried to help split firewood, the axe shattered against the block with a force far beyond his own strength. Shards of iron scattered across the yard, one grazing his cheek. He dropped the handle, clutching his hands. The marks glowed brighter, as though mocking him. He felt watched, judged by powers he did not understand. That night he left the house quietly, slipping into the forest again. He thought perhaps the stone would explain itself, or maybe he could undo what he had unleashed. But when he reached the clearing, the stone was gone. Only an empty patch of earth remained, as though nothing had ever been there. Desperation clawed at him. He sank to his knees, pressing his palms into the dirt. "Why me?" he whispered into the silence. "I never asked for this." His voice trembled, lost in the vastness of the woods. The answer came in a surge of heat that raced up his arms. His hands erupted in flames, white, searing, yet they did not burn him. He gasped, stumbling back. The fire danced freely, wild and alive, licking the branches without consuming them. It was beautiful, terrifying, impossible, and it would not stop. Panic seized him. He flailed, tried to smother the fire, but the more he struggled, the higher it climbed. The trees groaned as sparks rained around him. He thought he would ignite the whole forest when a sudden force slammed through the air. The fire guttered out like a candle snuffed by a gust. Elias fell to the ground, coughing, trembling. When he lifted his eyes, the cloaked stranger was there again. "You'll burn the world to ash if you let fear rule you," the man said, voice low, but sharp as iron. "The ether answers not to panic, but to will. Learn that, or it will consume you." Elias struggled to his knees. "Why is this happening? I never wanted magic." The stranger's eyes narrowed, glowing faintly as though lit from within. "The ether does not ask what you want. It chooses. And once chosen, you cannot walk away. There are others who feel its call, and not all wish to preserve the balance. If you do not learn, they will find you and bend you into their design." Elias shivered. "Who are you?" "A guide," the man replied. "For now. But names have weight, and you are not ready for mine. Come." He extended a hand, pale against the folds of his cloak. "If you stay here, you'll doom yourself and all around you. But if you follow, you may yet learn to survive." Elias hesitated. Every instinct told him not to trust this stranger, yet what choice did he have? His family already feared him, his village whispered curses, and the power boiling inside him threatened to destroy everything he touched. Slowly, with a shaking breath, he reached for the hand. The moment their palms met, the world shifted. The forest blurred, twisting into streaks of color, and the ground dropped from under him. Elias's stomach lurched as if he were falling through endless air. Then, as suddenly as it began, the motion ceased. He stumbled forward onto smooth stone. They stood within a vast cavern lit by floating lanterns that burned with no flame. Carved into the walls were countless runes, glowing softly, shifting like living script. At the center rose a circle of monolithic stones, taller than houses, arranged with precise geometry that hummed with power. Elias's breath caught. He had never seen such a place, never imagined it could exist. "This is a threshold," the stranger said, walking forward. "One of the few places left where the ether still runs pure." Here you will learn. Here you will either master what you are, or be undone by it. Elias's chest tightened. And if I fail? The man looked back at him, eyes cold but not cruel. Then the fire that stirs in you will not need an enemy to kill you. It will eat you whole. A chill swept through Elias's veins, but beneath the fear was something else, a flicker of determination. The world beyond the cavern felt distant now, like another life already lost. Perhaps he had never belonged to it. Perhaps his path had always led here. The stranger gestured to the circle of stones. Step inside. The ether will test you. Do not resist, but do not surrender. Balance is the only way forward. Elias's legs felt heavy, but he moved. Each step echoed against the cavern walls. As he crossed the threshold into the circle, the air thickened, pressing down on him like invisible hands. His heart thundered. The marks on his arms blazed brighter until they painted the cavern in silver light. And then the world broke apart. Darkness swallowed everything. Elias floated in a void, weightless, breathless, surrounded by whispers. Shapes moved in the black, vast and shifting. Serpents of flame, eyes of molten gold, towers of shadow that reached into infinity. The whispers grew into voices, each vying for his attention. Take the fire. Let it burn. You will never fear again. Claim the storm. Crush those who mocked you. Yield the shadow. Power without price. Elias clutched his head, teeth gritted. The voices tore at his thoughts, pulling him in every direction. His skin burned, his blood roared. He wanted it all, feared it all, needed it to stop. Through the cacophony, another sound rose, a steady heartbeat, not his own. It was calm, patient, unyielding. He focused on it, clung to it like a rope in a raging sea. Slowly, the voices dimmed. The flames receded, the shadows drew back, and Elias stood on solid ground once more. When he opened his eyes, he was back in the cavern, kneeling on the stone floor. Sweat drenched his body, his chest heaved, but he was alive. The stranger stood at the edge of the circle, watching him. You touched the ether and returned, the man said. Few manage even that on their first trial. Perhaps you are not a mistake after all. Elias swallowed hard, too weak to argue. His hands still trembled, but beneath the fear there was strength he had not felt before, as though the fire inside him had settled into something he could almost control. For the first time since the stone had chosen him, he allowed himself to believe he might survive this. Days bled together in the cavern, though Elias could no longer tell how time moved in that place. There were no windows, no sunrises, no measure of hours. Only the endless glow of the runes and the constant hum of energy that wrapped around him like a second skin. His guide, though Elias still had no name for him, watched from the edges, silent more often than speaking. At first, Elias's lessons were simple. He was told to listen, to close his eyes, to breathe, to sink beneath the surface of himself where the ether stirred. It was not like listening to a river or to wind in the trees. It was listening to the space between sound, to the silence that was alive with possibility. It was maddening. Elias would sweat and shake, convinced he was doing nothing, only for his guide to tell him he had failed. Magic is not summoned, the man said one evening, his voice echoing against the stone. It is remembered. The ether is not yours to command. It already flows through all things. You are not its master. You are its vessel. Elias clenched his fists. Then why does it fight me? Because you fight yourself. The man stepped closer, the faint light catching the hard lines of his face beneath the hood. You burn with fear. You try to cage it. That is why it escapes, why it hurts you. You cannot pour lightning into a closed hand. You must open, or you will break. The words cut deep, though Elias did not fully understand them. Yet something shifted in him after that night. He stopped demanding. He stopped forcing. And slowly, the ether began to answer. It began with sparks again, this time rising not from panic but from focus. He would sit cross-legged, palms open, and tiny strands of silver light would weave between his fingers. Sometimes they snapped and died, but other times they lingered, dancing like fireflies in the dark. Each success filled him with a quiet exhilaration, though exhaustion always followed. Then came fire, controlled at last. He called it like a breath, felt it flicker at his fingertips, then held it steady without letting it rage out of control. He could make it curl around his hand, glowing but harmless. Once, when he lost his concentration, it leapt high and scorched the ceiling, but his guide only raised a brow and said, "Better." The hardest lesson was restraint. Elias discovered quickly that once the ether answered, it wanted to be used. It pushed against him, urging him to release it in waves of fire or force. There were times he trembled with the effort of holding it back. His guide taught him that discipline was not in suppressing the ether, but in shaping it, giving it form without letting it devour him. Weeks, perhaps months, passed before his guide finally spoke of others. "You are not alone in this gift," the man said one night, while Elias struggled to control a sphere of light that pulsed between his hands. "There are those who have walked this path for centuries. Some guard the balance. Others," he paused, eyes darkening. "Others take what they can, twisting the ether until it obeys only their hunger." Elias swallowed. "And which are you?" The faintest smile touched the man's lips, though it did not soften him. "I am what the world requires me to be. The better question is, which will you be?" Elias did not answer. He had no answer. Not yet. The question haunted him as his training deepened. He learned to pull water from the air, to draw warmth from stone, to feel the heartbeat of the earth when he pressed his palm against it. Once, his guide told him to focus on the space between breaths. When Elias obeyed, he felt his body dissolve into the cavern, as though he were both himself and the air, the rock, the light all at once. The sensation terrified him, yet also left him hungering for more. But not all was wonder. Some nights, when he slept on the cold stone, the visions returned. He saw faces again, those same thousands from the night of the stone. He saw fire consuming cities, rivers boiling dry, storms tearing the sky apart. Always at the center of the destruction, he saw himself, his hands blazing with uncontrollable power. He woke screaming, drenched in sweat, the glow of the marks searing hot across his arms. His guide never comforted him. He only watched. When Elias finally asked why, the man said, "The ether shows you what lies ahead if you falter. Do not mistake it for prophecy. It is warning, not fate." The words steadied him, though the fear never vanished. One day, during a lesson of focus, Elias lost control again. He was meant to form a simple flame, to hold it steady. But a surge of energy slammed through him, too strong, too sudden. Fire roared outward, searing across the cavern. The runes flickered wildly. The cavern groaned as if it might collapse. Elias fell to his knees, certain he had destroyed everything. But his guide stepped forward, calm as stone. With a single gesture, the fire bent, curling away, spiraling harmlessly into the air before fading. The man's eyes glowed like molten silver as he turned them on Elias. "This is what waits when you think only of power," he said, voice sharp as a blade. "You lose yourself, and the world pays the price. Remember this." Shame hollowed Elias, but beneath it flickered determination. He did not want to be the boy who lost control. He did not want to be the destroyer from his visions. He wanted mastery, even if it took the rest of his life. That night, as he sat alone by the circle of stones, he whispered to the silence, "I don't know why you chose me, but if this is my path, I will not run from it. I will not let you consume me." And for the first time, the hum of the ether within him answered not with fire or visions, but with a calm warmth, steady and still. The cavern that had been Elias's prison and sanctuary was no longer enough. His guide must have sensed it, because one morning, though Elias still could not tell what marked day from night, the man announced they would leave. "You have tasted discipline," he said, standing tall by the circle of stones. "Now you must see the world again. The ether is not meant to be caged in hollow rock. It flows in every living thing, and only there will you learn its true nature." Elias felt both relief and dread. Part of him longed for the open sky, for the scent of pine and rain, for the simple comfort of air untainted by stone dust. But another part feared what waited. He had barely kept his fire from burning the cavern to ruin. What would happen among people? Still, he followed. His guide led him through a narrow passage, deeper and deeper, until the tunnel curved upward. Hours passed before a soft glow lit their path, and then, with a final step, Elias found himself beneath the heavens. The sky stretched vast and endless above him, scattered with stars. He inhaled sharply, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of it after so long underground. The forest surrounded them, but not the one he remembered. These trees were older, larger, their trunks like pillars carved by giants. The air buzzed faintly with the same hum he felt in the cavern, but wilder, untamed. "We are far from your village now," his guide said, "and safer for it. But danger still prowls. You must be ready." Elias frowned. Danger? The man's eyes gleamed faintly silver. Not all who wield the ether seek balance. Some hunger for dominion. Some would see the world remade in their image. And some. His gaze flicked toward the shadows between the trees. "Already know of you." Elias's blood ran cold. "Already? You are not subtle," the man replied, almost dryly. "The ether shines through you like a beacon. It calls to others. Whether they come to guide you or to use you remains to be seen." They walked until the trees thinned, opening into a valley where the remnants of ruins lay scattered across the grass. Shattered pillars jutted from the earth, broken walls carved with the same runes that had glowed in the cavern. Elias slowed, staring in awe. What was this place? The man's voice grew softer, almost reverent. "A sanctuary. Long before you were born, long before even your village existed, circles like this stood across the world. Here the first mages gathered. Here they sought balance. Most are dust now, but some still breathe power." Elias touched one of the stones. It was warm, faintly vibrating, alive. He shivered. That was when the laughter came. It drifted across the ruins like smoke, mocking, sharp, far too close. Elias spun, sparks snapping to life in his palms. From the shadows of a broken archway stepped a figure, younger than his guide but older than Elias, clad in dark leather stitched with strange sigils. His hair was black as ink, his eyes a molten amber that glowed with unholy light. "Well, well," the stranger drawled, his grin cutting like a blade. The whispers were true. The stone chose a boy. And such a fragile one at that. Elias's throat tightened. His fire flared brighter, uncontrolled. "Who are you?" The man gave a shallow bow, mocking in its grace. "Call me Kael. It matters little. What matters is what you carry. I felt at the moment you touched the ether. You burn too bright to hide, little spark." His smile widened. "And I want it." Elias's guide stepped forward, placing himself between them. His voice was iron. "You will not have him." Kael laughed again, but it was darker now, edged with hunger. "You think you can keep him from me? Power this raw cannot be sheltered forever. You've taught him to hold a candle. Good. I'll teach him to wield a storm." His eyes slid to Elias, piercing. "You've felt it, haven't you? The visions. The fire that wants to swallow you whole. Do you think balance will save you from that? No. Only strength. Only by seizing it, bending it, can you survive." The words struck deep. Elias wanted to deny them, but he remembered the nights of fire consuming cities in his dreams, the roar of uncontrolled power, the fear that he was destined to destroy. He faltered. Kael saw the hesitation and stepped closer, hand outstretched. "Come with me. I will show you the truth. Your guide hides you from it, but I will give you mastery. No more fear, no more weakness, only power." The hum of the ether surged within Elias, drawn to the stranger's voice, tempted by its promise. For a heartbeat, he wanted to take that hand, to end the fear, to claim the strength. But his guide's voice cut through, steady and unyielding. "He is not yours to claim." Kael's smile vanished, replaced by a snarl. "Then he will be your grave." The air cracked. Shadows coiled around Kael's hands, condensing into blades of midnight fire. Elias staggered back as the ground trembled, runes flickering across the ruined stones. His own power surged wildly in answer, begging to be unleashed. The first true battle had found him. Kael moved first. The air split as his shadow-forged blade cut forward, a streak of black fire leaving a scar in the earth. Elias flinched back, throwing up his hands without thought. Light burst from his palms, raw, blinding, and the attack shattered against it, spraying sparks into the night. The force knocked him to the ground, his chest heaving, ears ringing. Kael laughed, cruel and sharp. Good. There's more in you than fear after all. His eyes burned brighter. Let it out. Don't hold back or you'll die. Elias scrambled to his feet. His guide stood motionless at the edge of the ruins, watching, not intervening. Rage flared in Elias's chest. Why won't you help me? But before he could shout, Kael came again, faster this time, a storm of blades spinning from his hands. Elias felt the ether roar inside him, hot and desperate. He spread his fingers and fire leapt outward, not the wild, devouring fire of panic, but a stream that curled and lashed like a whip. It struck one of Kael's blades and dissolved it in a hiss of sparks. For a heartbeat, triumph surged. Then Kael was upon him. Their power collided, light against shadow, heat against cold. The impact exploded outward, shattering stones, sending waves of energy rippling through the valley. Elias stumbled, barely holding the fire steady. His arms burned, his vision swam, but he refused to yield. You feel it, don't you? Kael's voice was a growl, close to his ear though their bodies never touched. That hunger, that endless storm inside. You think you can control it, balance it. You can't. It will tear you apart unless you own it. Take it, shape it, or it will consume you. The words clawed at Elias's mind, echoing the fears he carried from his visions. His fire wavered. Shadows pressed harder, wrapping around his arms, creeping toward his chest. The darkness whispered promises, strength, freedom, the end of fear. He gasped, choking on it. But then, beneath the chaos, he remembered something else. His guide's words, spoken in the cavern, the ether is not yours to command, it already flows through all things. You are not its master. You are its vessel. A vessel, not a thief, not a conqueror. Elias forced his breath to steady. Instead of pushing against the ether, he let it move through him. Not fire, not rage, just flow. His body stopped fighting, and suddenly the power surged clean and bright, no longer tangled in panic. The silver marks on his arms blazed like stars. Light erupted. A shockwave rippled outward, tearing Kael's shadows apart, hurling the rival mage backward across the ruins. The ground cracked where Elias stood, runes in the stones igniting in answer. His whole body shook, but the fire in him was calm, controlled, for once, truly his. Kael rolled to his knees, teeth bared, eyes wide with fury and something like envy. You think this makes you strong? He spat, voice raw. Balance is weakness. Mercy is weakness. The world doesn't bow to vessels, boy. It bows to those who take. He rose, shadows coiling thicker, darker. But before he could strike again, a deep note thrummed through the valley. The ruins themselves glowed, the runes blazing with power awakened by the clash. The air grew heavy, thick with ether so dense it bent the very sky. Kael hissed, stepping back. Another time, he growled, his molten eyes locking on Elias. You'll see the truth. When the fire inside eats you alive, you'll come to me. And then, his grin returned, sharp and terrible. Then you'll beg to learn. He dissolved into smoke, vanishing into the night. Elias collapsed to his knees, every muscle trembling, his breath ragged. The glow on his arms dimmed, leaving only faint traces beneath the skin. He was drained, hollow, yet alive. More alive than he had ever felt. His guide finally approached, silent for a long while. Elias expected rebuke or perhaps rare praise, but instead the man only said, "Now you know what hunts you." Elias's voice cracked. "He'll come back." Yes. The man's gaze turned to the sky, where the stars still trembled with the aftermath of their clash. And not only him. The moment you touched the stone, your path ceased to be your own. The world will not leave you in peace. Elias shivered, but somewhere deep within, beneath the fear, a spark of resolve took root. He had faced Kael and lived. He had not surrendered to the hunger. For now, that was enough. The guide's eyes returned to him, steady and piercing. This was only the beginning. The morning after the battle in the ruins, Elias woke to the sound of birdsong, though the air still tasted faintly of ash. His body ached, every joint heavy, but the silver marks on his arms glowed faintly like embers refusing to die. His guide sat nearby, tending a small fire, his cloak drawn tightly as though the night's chill still lingered. For a while, they did not speak. Elias only stared into the flames, remembering Kael's grin, his words like poison. Balance is weakness. Mercy is weakness. Those whispers clung to him like cobwebs, tempting, dangerous. Finally, his guide broke the silence. You are not ready to stay in one place. The ether in you is too loud. It will draw others, like him. If you remain here, your village will burn. Do you understand? Elias swallowed, his chest tightening. He thought of his mother, of the small home he had already endangered when the hearth had flared out of control. He thought of the villagers' suspicious eyes. He knew his guide spoke truth. "Where do we go?" he asked quietly. The man looked toward the horizon, where the mountains cut jagged lines against the pale morning sky. There are others who walk the path of ether. Not all are enemies. Some will teach if you prove worthy. Together, they form a circle older than kings. If you would survive, you must find them. The journey began that day. They walked through forests that seemed to breathe with unseen life, across rivers that sang in languages Elias almost understood, over hills where ancient stones stood like guardians of forgotten secrets. At night, Elias lay beneath the stars, feeling the ether pulse in his veins, listening to his guide's rare words, lessons wrapped in riddles, warnings disguised as stories. Yet the road was not empty. It was in a crumbling market town, 3 weeks into their journey, that Elias first met others touched by magic. The square was alive with chaos. Stalls overturned, merchants screaming, soldiers shouting. In the center of it all, a young woman stood, her hair wild, her eyes fierce, flames curling around her fists. She was surrounded by armored men, their blades drawn, their fear hidden poorly behind their anger. Elias froze, watching as she hurled fire like arrows, scattering soldiers back. But the flames flickered, uneven, wild. She was losing control, and the soldiers pressed closer. Before Elias could think, his legs carried him forward. He thrust out his hand, and light burst between the woman and her attackers, a shimmering wall that split the square in two. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The woman spun toward him, her fire dimming with surprise. For a heartbeat, their eyes met, hers sharp and wary, his wide with uncertainty. Then a soldier lunged at her flank, and Elias reacted without thought, sending a wave of force that knocked the man sprawling. The battle ended swiftly after that. Between her fire and his light, the soldiers broke and fled, muttering curses about cursed ones and abominations. The townsfolk scattered, some fearful, others awed, leaving the square eerily quiet. The woman straightened, brushing soot from her clothes. "You didn't have to help me," she said, her voice rough but not unkind. "You were outnumbered," Elias replied, still catching his breath. Her lips quirked in the faintest smile. "So were they." She extended a hand. "I'm Lyra." Elias hesitated, then took it. Her grip was strong, her skin warm with leftover fire. "Elias." Behind them, his guide finally stepped forward, his expression unreadable as always. But Elias thought he saw the faintest spark of approval in his eyes. Lyra did not leave. She joined them on the road the next morning, as though it had already been decided. And though Elias's guide said nothing, he did not send her away. Days passed, and Elias learned quickly that Lyra was nothing like him. Where he feared his power, she embraced hers. She laughed when fire spilled too far, cursed when it burned her sleeves, and tried again without hesitation. She called him too cautious, too careful, yet she never mocked the way his light steadied hers when her flames threatened to consume everything. In her company, Elias felt both unsettled and alive. For the first time, he was not alone with the storm inside him. But the world was not blind. Word of two young mages traveling together spread fast, carried by whispers and fear. In every town, soldiers watched them, priests muttered warnings, and strangers stared too long. Once, in a quiet inn, Elias overheard a merchant muttering Kael's name, describing a man of smoke and shadow who hunted across the land for those marked by Aether. The reminder chilled him. Kael had vanished, but his presence lingered like a shadow stretched across the world. One night, beneath a broken tower where they had made camp, Elias asked his guide the question that had haunted him since the ruins. Why me? Why did the stone choose me? The man studied him in the firelight, his eyes reflecting the flames. The Aether does not choose as men do. It awakens where it must. But remember this, Elias. Power is never a gift. It is a debt. And one day, the world will demand its payment. Elias lay awake long after, staring at the silver glow beneath his skin, wondering what debt he now carried, and what price it would demand. The mountains loomed ahead like sleeping giants, their peaks hidden beneath veils of snow and cloud. The path that wound toward them was treacherous, carved by rivers long dried, littered with jagged stone and the bones of trees. Few dared to travel this way, and Elias quickly understood why. Cold bit into his skin with every step. The silver glow beneath his veins seemed to shiver in answer, as if the Aether itself disliked the barren heights. Lyra walked ahead of him, her fire flickering at her fingertips for warmth, while their guide moved steadily at the front, unbothered by the harsh wind. Nights in the mountains were cruel. They huddled around small flames that Lyra fed with sparks from her hands, the fire struggling against the endless cold. Elias often lay awake, staring at the dark peaks, hearing whispers in the wind. Sometimes they were Kael's words, "Balance is weakness." Other times, they were his mother's voice, faint and far away, asking why he had left. It was on the fourth night that they found the ruins of a monastery, half buried in ice, its towers broken like the teeth of a great beast. They took shelter there, the walls offering little comfort against the storm, but enough to survive. As Elias explored the shattered halls by torchlight, he felt it again, the hum of Aether, faint but insistent. The air itself seemed alive, vibrating with echoes of forgotten rituals. He followed it deeper, through collapsed corridors, until he reached a chamber where the ceiling had caved, letting moonlight spill across the floor. There, seated among the rubble, was a man. He was old, though not broken. His beard was streaked with silver, his frame lean but strong. His eyes, when they lifted to Elias, gleamed with an unnatural light, not unlike the glow in Elias's own veins. "You walk loudly, boy," the man said, his voice deep and dry as stone. "Louder than you know." Elias froze, every instinct screaming to retreat, but the man raised a hand. Calm, not threatening. "Do not fear. If I wished you dead, this hall would already be your tomb." Lyra arrived behind him, fire in her palm, suspicious as ever. Their guide stepped from the shadows a moment later, his gaze narrowing. For the first time since Elias had met him, the guide's calm seemed to falter. "Orin," he said quietly. Lyra blinked. "You know him." The old man chuckled, a low sound that carried weight. "He knows me, though he wishes he did not. Many called me teacher, once. Many called me traitor, later." His gaze returned to Elias, sharp as a blade. "And who calls you, boy?" Elias swallowed, feeling the weight of that stare. "I don't know yet. Honest," Orin murmured. "That is rare." He shifted, rising slowly, and the air stirred with power. Even without moving, Elias felt the Aether around him bend toward the old man, as if drawn by his presence. Their guide stepped closer, his voice steady again. "We are only passing through. Leave him be." But Orin shook his head. "You bring a vessel of the stone into my hall and expect me to turn away? No." The boy burns too brightly to ignore. He looked back to Elias, his expression unreadable. "The stone chose you. I can feel its mark. You carry its song as I once did." Elias's breath caught. You touched the stone too?" A shadow flickered across Orin's face. Long ago, before I understood the cost. Silence hung heavy, broken only by the groan of the wind through shattered walls. Finally, Orin turned, walking deeper into the ruined hall. If you would learn, follow. If you would live blind, leave. The path ahead will devour you without guidance. Lyra scowled, flame flickering hotter in her hand. We don't even know if we can trust him. But Elias found his feet moving before he thought. There was something in Orin's voice, in the weight of his presence, that tugged at him. Not like Kael's whispers of power, nor his guide's riddles, but something raw, real, worn by years of carrying the same storm Elias now felt inside. He stepped after the old man. Lyra cursed under her breath and followed. Their guide remained still for a moment longer, then sighed, an almost human sound of resignation, and trailed behind them into the dark. In the depths of the monastery, beneath collapsed arches and frozen murals, Orin showed them a chamber where the walls themselves glowed faintly with runes. Here, he said, his voice low, reverent, is where the Aether once flowed like a river. The monks drank from it, shaped it, lost themselves to it. I was one of them. He touched a broken altar, his fingers trembling. And I was the last. Elias felt the hum stronger now, resonating in his bones. His veins lit faintly in response. Orin's eyes caught the glow, and for the first time, the old man's stern expression softened. Yes, Orin whispered. The stone's song still sings in you. Perhaps you will not repeat my mistakes. Or perhaps you will burn the world brighter than I ever could. Lyra muttered under her breath, but Elias barely heard. His heart pounded. The path was unfolding, dangerous and irresistible, and with every step, he felt himself drawn deeper into a fate he could no longer refuse. Orin began their lessons at dawn, when the frost still clung to the broken stones of the monastery and the wind howled through shattered arches. He wasted no time on pleasantries. Instead, he led Elias and Lyra to the rune-lit chamber beneath the ruins, where the air seemed thick with power, and commanded them to stand before the broken altar. Magic is not tricks, Orin said, his voice as sharp as the mountain air. It is not fire to light your hearth or light to blind your foes. It is a river that runs beneath all things, and you are but stones in its current. You cannot own it, though you will try. You cannot cage it, though many have bled to prove otherwise. You can only endure it, or drown. Elias shivered. Lyra crossed her arms, unimpressed. I already know how to use fire. What else is there to learn? Orin's eyes flashed, and in a breath, her flames guttered and died. She gasped, staring at her empty hands. Orin didn't move, but the runes on the walls pulsed faintly. You know how to burn, Orin said evenly, but not how to choose what survives the fire. That is the difference between a weapon and a fool. Lyra flushed, her pride stung, but she said nothing. Elias, meanwhile, felt the weight of the old man's gaze shift to him. And you, Orin continued, you fear the river even as you stand waist deep in its current. You hesitate, and in hesitation lies death. Power is not patient. If you will not use it, it will use you. Elias wanted to argue, but he couldn't. He remembered Kael's shadows wrapping around him, remembered how close he had come to losing himself. He lowered his head. Their guide, silent as always, watched from the shadows, offering no defense, no interruption. Orin had taken command, and Elias realized with a knot in his stomach that the man intended to break them before he built them. The training was relentless. Orin made them channel the Aether until their veins glowed like molten silver and their muscles trembled with exhaustion. He forced Lyra to shape her fire not into wild blasts but into delicate forms. Candles, threads, controlled sparks that danced like fireflies. He pushed Elias to summon light not as shields or desperate bursts, but as blades, as ropes, as currents of energy woven from focus rather than panic. Each failure was met with cutting words. Each success was dismissed as not enough. Yet, slowly, both began to feel their control sharpen, the wild storm inside them bending. Not broken, but guided. Nights were worse than the days. Orin spoke little of himself, but sometimes, when the fire burned low, he would stare into the flames as though seeing another life. Once, Elias dared to ask, What happened to the others? The monks who lived here. Orin's eyes did not leave the fire. They drowned. Silence followed, heavy and suffocating. Lyra did not press, though her gaze lingered on him with suspicion. Elias felt the unspoken truth in the man's tone. Orin had been one of them, and he had survived when none else had. The question of how and why haunted Elias long after. But shadows do not stay buried forever. It was on the 12th night, as the storm outside finally broke and moonlight washed the ruins, that strangers came. Elias woke to the sound of boots on stone, voices hushed but urgent. He rose quickly, silver glowing faintly beneath his skin, and found Lyra already on her feet, fire sparking in her palms. Their guide had vanished into the darkness, silent as always. Figures emerged into the torchlight. 5 men, cloaked, blades drawn. Their leader stepped forward, scarred and grim, his eyes fixed on Orin. "Traitor," the man spat. Orin did not move from where he sat, though his jaw tightened. "I told you once," he said quietly. "I left the circle to keep its fire from consuming more lives." "You left because you feared judgment," the man snapped. His blade gleamed in the torchlight. "You abandoned your brothers. You left us to die." Lyra glanced at Elias, confusion in her eyes. Elias felt his stomach turn. The circle. Was that what Orin had meant? The order of monks, the ones who had drowned in their own power. Had Orin betrayed them? The men raised their blades, stepping closer. "The stone calls again," their leader said. "And now you harbor the boy who carries its mark. We will not allow this. Not again." Elias's pulse raced. The silver in his arms blazed, light spilling across the chamber. Lyra's fire roared to life, fierce and wild. Orin finally stood, his presence filling the room like thunder. "You would raise steel against me?" His voice was low, dangerous. The air itself vibrated. "Then come, and remember why I was the last to walk away from the circle's ashes." The clash was sudden, violent. Steel met fire, light met shadow. Orin's power tore through the chamber like a storm, his hands weaving ether with a precision Elias could only dream of. Lyra's flames flared beside him, wild but sharp, striking down blades that came too close. Elias felt the river roar inside him, and for the first time, he did not hold it back. Light streamed from him, dazzling, forcing their foes to stumble. The battle raged until the invaders broke, retreating into the night with curses and promises of vengeance. When silence returned, Elias's chest heaved with exhaustion, his skin glowing faintly. Lyra dropped to her knees, sweat soaking her brow. Orin stood still in the center of the chamber, his face unreadable. But Elias had seen enough. He had seen the fury in Orin's eyes, the way the old man had unleashed power with merciless precision. This was not only a teacher. This was a man who had killed to survive, a man who had walked through the ruin of his own brothers. And Elias realized, with a chill deeper than the mountain winds, that they were walking beside a storm barely held in check. They left the monastery before dawn. The air was sharp, the mountains painted in pale gray light, their peaks hidden behind drifting clouds. Snow crunched beneath their boots as they descended narrow paths, silence hanging heavy among them. Elias glanced back once at the ruins. The broken towers stood like jagged teeth against the sky, the rune-lit chamber now nothing but a memory buried in stone. He felt both relief and regret. Relief to leave the ghosts behind, regret to abandon the strange hum of ether that had made him feel less alone. Lyra walked beside him, restless energy in her stride. She muttered under her breath about cowards and traitors, her flame sparking faintly in the cold. Elias knew she had questions, the same ones he carried, but neither of them dared to speak them aloud while Orin walked ahead. The old man's presence was heavier now, darker since the night of the attack. He said nothing of the men who had come for him, nothing of the circle or his place in it. He simply led them down the mountain with steady steps, as if the confrontation had never happened. But Elias could not let it rest. On the second night, when they camped by a frozen stream, he finally asked, "What did they mean? That you abandoned the circle? That you let them die?" Lyra's fire snapped louder, her eyes narrowing toward Orin. She had wanted the question asked. Orin sat across the fire, his face shadowed by the flames. For a long moment, he did not answer. The silence stretched until Elias thought he would refuse. Then the old man spoke, his voice low, as though each word cost him something. The circle was not what you think. We were not keepers of wisdom, nor guardians of peace. We were seekers, hungry men, drunk on the ether, clawing deeper into its current with every breath. We thought ourselves chosen. We thought the river was ours to command. His eyes lifted, catching the firelight, sharp and sorrowful all at once. I was among the proudest. I taught them to pull more than their bodies could endure, to bend the river until it screamed. And when the flood came, when the ether tore through us like fire through dry grass, it was my hand that had opened the door. Elias's chest tightened. You survived. Orin's jaw clenched. I survived because I let them drown in my place. The fire crackled, filling the silence. Lyra's face hardened, her eyes burning as fiercely as her flames. So you admit it. You betrayed them. Orin did not flinch. I killed them, not by blade, but by arrogance. Every face, every scream lives here. He tapped his chest with a gnarled hand. The circle is ash because of me. That is my debt. Elias stared into the flames, the weight of Orin's words pressing down on him. Part of him recoiled in anger, in fear of what it meant to trust a man who had brought such ruin. But another part, the part that remembered Kael's whispers, that felt the river of ether threatening to drag him under, saw something else. Saw the cost of arrogance, of surrender, of believing the lie that power could be owned. You teach us, Elias said softly, so we don't repeat your mistakes. Orin's gaze met his. For a moment, the hardness in his eyes softened. Or so that when you fall, you understand the weight of the stone you carry. Lyra turned away, muttering curses, her flames flickering angrily at her fingertips. But Elias said nothing more. He lay awake that night, listening to the wind scrape across the stones, and wondered if Orin's debt was the same one the world now demanded of him. The next days were harsh. The mountain paths grew narrower, more dangerous, and storms swept down without warning. Yet through it all, Orin pushed them harder, forcing Lyra to ignite flames and blizzards until she nearly collapsed, making Elias weave light into bridges of energy to cross ravines when his body shook with exhaustion. You think the world will wait for your breath? Orin barked when Elias stumbled. It will strike when you are weakest. Either you rise, or you break. Anger burned in Elias, but beneath it, so did resolve. He began to feel the river in new ways. Not as chaos, not as hunger, but as rhythm. Flow. His light no longer flared wild, but curved, shaped, bending to his will like a blade he had only just learned to hold. Lyra's fire, too, grew sharper. She stopped throwing wild bursts, instead honing flames into arrows, spears, even threads she used to melt locks and carve stone. Yet her temper burned hotter with every lesson, her pride stung again and again by Orin's relentless scorn. By the time they reached the foothills, they were no longer the same two youths who had climbed into the mountains. But Orin remained a storm beside them, powerful, dangerous, and carrying a silence that hid too many scars. And the world had not stopped watching. On the final night before they descended into the valleys, a raven circled their camp. Its feathers shimmered like oil, its eyes glowing faintly red. Elias froze as it landed on a stone, watching them with unnatural stillness. Orin's face darkened. Kael! The bird tilted its head, and Elias swore he heard a whisper in the wind. Balance is weakness. Lyra cursed, her fire sparking. Orin hurled a stone, and the raven scattered into smoke, dissolving into the night sky. Elias's stomach churned. Kael had not forgotten. Kael was watching. And as the first light of dawn touched the mountains, Elias knew their descent into the valleys would not bring peace. The storm was spreading, and every step forward carried them deeper into its heart. The valley stretched wide beneath them, golden in the late afternoon sun. Towns and farms dotted the landscape, their smoke rising lazily into the sky, unaware of the storm that had followed Elias, Lyra, and Orin down from the mountains. For a moment, the trio paused, thinking the descent would bring calm. It did not. As they entered the first village, The villagers stared in silence. Word of the marked had spread faster than any messenger could have carried it. Children hid behind doors, farmers gripped their tools like weapons, and priests whispered warnings of fire and ruin. Elias felt the tension prickling along his spine, the ether thrumming in response. Kael had vanished, but his shadow seemed to stretch across every cautious glance. A bell tolled from the village square. Soldiers emerged, armed and wary, surrounding the trio. Their leader, a tall man with a cruel scar across his cheek, stepped forward. "You carry the mark of the stone," he said, voice loud enough to echo across the square. "We will not allow magic to run unchecked in our lands. Surrender, or be destroyed." Lyra's flames licked at her palms, ready to defend. Elias's silver veins glimmered beneath his skin. Orin's eyes, dark and stormy, scanned the crowd, calculating every angle, every threat. "You mistake caution for weakness," Orin said calmly. "We bring no harm, only knowledge and protection. But if you strike, do not pretend we did not warn you." The villagers hesitated. Fear warred with curiosity. But the scarred leader tightened his grip on his sword. "We strike first. Magic brings ruin. Always." And then the attack came. Blades glinted in sunlight. Ether flared. Fire and light intertwined as Lyra and Elias fought with everything they had learned. Orin moved like a shadow made solid, striking with precision and power honed over decades. The villagers were skilled, but unprepared for the fusion of three wielders of the stone song. Chaos raged for hours. Flames licked at timber, light ripped through the streets, but Elias and Lyra controlled their power, targeting only soldiers, protecting bystanders, shaping the fury rather than letting it devour them. Orin moved silently among them, ensuring none of the innocents fell. Finally, the square lay quiet. The villagers, beaten but alive, stared at the trio in awe and fear. The scarred leader dropped to his knees, sword in the dirt. You have power beyond reckoning," he whispered. "And mercy." Elias's chest heaved. His light pulsed faintly, drained but steady. Lyra's fire sputtered, flickering in exhaustion. Orin's expression softened for the first time in days. A small, almost imperceptible nod of approval. The lesson had been clear. Power without control destroys, but control without courage accomplishes nothing. And in this balance, Elias felt the truth of his journey. The storm inside him was not to be tamed or feared, it was to be understood, carried, and shaped. As night fell over the valley, the three sat atop a hill overlooking the village. Fires burned low in chimneys, and the stars blinked awake above. Elias's guide, silent once more, finally spoke. "You have grown. The river flows through you now, not against you. But remember, Kael watches. And the world is not patient." Elias nodded. He did not fear the future, not completely. He had seen darkness, he had faced it, and survived. Whatever storms lay ahead, he knew one thing. He would face them with control, courage, and those who stood beside him. Lyra nudged him playfully, flames flicking lightly across her fingers. "Don't get sentimental, boy. The adventure isn't over yet." Elias smiled, feeling the calm strength of the ether inside him. The valley below was quiet, but life pulsed through it, fragile and beautiful. The journey had changed him, marked him, but it had also given him something few could claim. Mastery of the storm within, and the resolve to protect, not destroy. Above, the stars shone silver and cold, reflecting the marks beneath his skin. The stone song still hummed in his veins, but now it was a melody he could follow rather than one that followed him. And for the first time, Elias felt certain. He was ready. The end.